I never thought a pair of heels could change my life, but that afternoon proved me wrong in ways I couldn't have imagined. It started as a joke, really. My sister had left her closet door open, a careless mistake, and there they were, her tall, shiny heels perched perfectly under the bottom shelf. I stared at them. The deep maroon color. Curiosity has a strange way of overpowering logic, especially when no one is watching. I slipped one foot into a heel, then the other, wobbling at first, feeling the unfamiliar height tilt my balance. The strange weight and the unnatural angle made me feel clumsy, exposed, yet oddly exhilarated. I took a cautious step forward, then another. My reflection in the mirror caught me off guard. For the first time, I didn't just see myself, I saw a version of me I had never acknowledged before. My hair fell differently around my face, my posture felt different, more confident, or maybe more fragile, I wasn't sure. And then she walked in. My sister's voice cut through the air like a jolt. "You're missing something." I froze. My cheeks burned hot, a mix of embarrassment and fear. I stumbled, unsure how to explain myself without sounding ridiculous. Her eyes were sharp, yet there was something in them that wasn't judgment. She tilted her head and gestured toward my bare arms, my plain clothes. "It's not just the heels. It's the rest of it. You need the full look, or you'll never know how it feels." I blinked, confused. She wasn't angry. She wasn't mocking me. She was serious. She moved closer, her fingers brushing over the edge of the heels I was still struggling to balance in. "Come on," she said softly, "trust me." Before I could protest, she guided me toward her wardrobe. She pulled out a dress, holding it up for me to see. I wanted to laugh, to tell her no, but the sincerity in her eyes made me pause. Something inside me, a part one hadn't dared to explore, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was my chance. I stepped into the dress with trembling hands, feeling the silky fabric glide against my skin. The transformation wasn't immediate, but as I looked at myself, the reflection staring back wasn't just me playing dress-up. It was a version of me that had been hidden, ignored, tucked away beneath layers of what I thought I was supposed to be. She circled me slowly, adjusting the fit, smoothing the wrinkles. Her hands lingered on my shoulders, steadying me. "There," she said finally, "now you're ready." Ready. The word felt strange, alien, yet thrilling. I walked toward the mirror again, this time moving more confidently, the heels no longer foreign but part of a rhythm I was learning to feel. I tilted my head, examined my face, noticed the way my eyes seemed wider, more open, as if they were seeing me clearly for the first time. And then she did something unexpected. She pulled a small compact from her purse, opened it, and handed me the powder puff. "Here," she said, "let's finish it. You're missing the details." My hands shook as I applied the light makeup. I had never done this before, never imagined myself doing it. Yet with every brush stroke, every touch of color, I felt a strange freedom. I wasn't just copying her. I was discovering pieces of myself that had been buried under years of habit, of self-consciousness. When I finally stepped back, she smiled. "See? Now you're really seeing yourself." I hardly recognized the person in the mirror. My body, my movements, my entire presence had shifted, but it felt authentic. Not fake. Not a costume. Just me, finally seen in a way I hadn't allowed before. But then reality hit. I was terrified. My heart raced as I imagined what my friends, my parents, even strangers would think if they saw me like this. Doubts clawed at me, but her hand on my shoulder was grounding. "It's okay," she said quietly. "You don't have to show anyone else yet. Just feel it for yourself first." I nodded, breathing slowly. For the first time in years, I felt a strange clarity, a sense that something long ignored was finally waking up. She guided me toward the living room, where the sunlight streamed through the windows. I walked, each step in the heels making a soft click against the hardwood floor. It was rhythmic, deliberate, empowering. I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel silly. I felt right. She didn't say much after that, just watched me move, her expression calm but encouraging. And as the hours passed, I experimented different poses, different angles, even trying her hairpins and accessories. Every adjustment, every trial, pulled me further from the person I had always been expected to be, and closer to someone new, someone I had been scared to admit existed. Eventually, she handed me a small notebook. "Write it down," she said simply. "Your thoughts. Your fears. Your discoveries. No one else has to see this. This is just for you." I sat on the floor, heels digging into the carpet, and started to write. Words poured out confessions I had never spoken, emotions I had never acknowledged. The more I wrote, the lighter I felt. The heels, the dress, the makeup, they were all symbols, yes, but the real transformation was inside me. The courage to look at myself, truly look, and accept what I saw. Days turned into weeks, and each day I explored this new part of myself a little more. Sometimes alone, sometimes with her guiding me. She never pushed, never forced, but always encouraged, always reminded me that discovery is its own reward. I learned to walk without wobbling, to move with grace I never thought I had. I learned to style my hair, to pick colors that suited my skin tone, to understand that presentation was more than just appearance, it was confidence, identity, and honesty all at once. One afternoon, as I practiced walking down the hallway in the heels, she appeared again, leaning against the doorframe. "You've changed," she said. "Not just the outside. You're different inside too. Stronger. More certain." I looked at her, uncertain if it was a compliment or an observation, but she smiled knowingly. "This isn't just about clothes or shoes. It's about who you are, who you can be when you let go of fear." I felt tears prick my eyes. I had spent so long hiding, so long doubting, so long convincing myself that any curiosity, any desire to explore this side of me was wrong. And yet, here I was, standing taller than I had ever stood, literally and metaphorically, feeling something I could only describe as whole. That night, alone in my room, I sat in front of the mirror again. I removed the heels, the dress, the makeup. And yet, I didn't feel smaller. I didn't feel fake. I felt prepared, armed with knowledge of myself, armed with the courage to face the world in a way I had never dared. I smiled at the reflection and whispered, "You're ready. Whatever comes next, you're ready." Weeks later, I found myself sharing parts of this journey with close friends, carefully, tentatively. Their reactions varied: curiosity, confusion, even admiration, but the fear I had expected didn't overwhelm me. Because I had already faced my deepest fear, that part of me I had ignored, the part that wanted to step into those heels, that dress, that identity. And I had embraced it. She saw me first, yes. She nudged me, encouraged me, guided me. But the transformation, real, lasting, irreversible, was mine. Every click of the heels, every brushstroke of makeup, every careful adjustment of hair or dress, was a step toward myself, a revelation that I had been hiding in plain sight all along. Now, months later, I still keep the heels under my bed, the dress in my wardrobe, the notebook filled with secrets and confessions tucked safely away. But the reflection in the mirror, the one I see every day, is no longer a stranger. It's me. Fully me. Brave, curious, unafraid. And whenever I catch her watching me with that knowing smile, I finally understand what she meant that first day. You're missing something. I wasn't missing shoes or clothes. I was missing myself. After those first weeks of exploring, of learning, of simply being myself in ways I never had before, reality began to creep in like a shadow. It started small, a friend's offhand comment about my posture, the way I carried myself, or a teasing remark about a new accessory I had dared to try. Each comment felt like a pinprick, reminding me that the world wasn't always ready to see me this way. I tried to shrug it off, to tell myself I didn't care, but deep down, anxiety gnawed at me. One evening, I sat on my bed in the dim light, heels set aside, notebook open. I read through my old entries, tracing my journey from curiosity to full exploration, and I realized just how fragile my confidence still was. I had embraced this version of myself, yes, but I hadn't yet faced the scrutiny, the judgment, the questions that would inevitably come. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if every step I had taken in those heels had been a rehearsal for a stage that hadn't yet opened. The next day, I was at a small gathering of friends, nothing extravagant, just a casual hangout, but I wore the dress again. Subtle makeup, not too bold, just enough to feel like me. At first, everything seemed fine. People chatted, laughed, no one stared. But then, someone I considered close, someone I had trusted, paused mid-sentence, eyes widening just a fraction, before recovering with a forced laugh. New style, huh? The tone wasn't cruel, but the hesitation, the shock, was enough to make my heart race. I forced a laugh, but inside, the old fear surfaced. What if this side of me was never accepted? What if my desire to explore and express myself made me a joke, a spectacle, something to be pitied or mocked? I felt the weight of the heels beneath me, the balance between wanting to stand tall and wanting to retreat. Later that night, I confided in my sister. She listened, silently, letting me spill everything, the doubts, the embarrassment, the fear that maybe I had gone too far. When I paused, exhausted, she smiled softly. "You didn't go too far," she said. "You went exactly where you needed to go. This isn't about what they see. It's about what you see. And you've seen yourself, truly seen yourself. That's bravery, not foolishness." Her words were comforting, but they didn't erase the anxiety. Over the following days, I caught myself second-guessing every movement, every choice of clothing, every glance in the mirror. I began experimenting with ways to be less noticeable, more subtle, trying to blend, trying to feel safe. And yet, every time I looked at the notebook, every time I tried on the heels or the dress alone, the spark returned. That spark refused to be extinguished by fear. It came to a head one evening when a neighbor unexpectedly stopped by. I wasn't prepared, my hair wasn't done, my makeup minimal, but I was wearing a skirt, one of the simpler ones I had dared to try. They made a passing comment, harmless in tone, but I froze. I felt myself shrinking, wanting to disappear. My sister, who had come with me, gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Don't shrink," she whispered. "You belong here as much as anyone else. Don't hide." The words hit me harder than I expected. She was right. Every hesitation, every attempt to blend, every fearful thought was just another wall I had built between myself and the person I was becoming. That night, alone, I stared at the mirror and made a promise to myself. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now I would stop shrinking. I would embrace every inch of the person I had discovered, regardless of what others thought. The transformation deepened after that. It wasn't just clothing, heels, or makeup anymore, it was a mindset. I began to explore other facets of self-expression, different hairstyles, subtle jewelry, even experimenting with voice and posture. Each experiment was a revelation. Each small success, a victory. But with each victory, the stakes felt higher. I realized that the more I embraced this side of myself, the harder it would be to hide it from the people who had always known me differently. At work, subtle changes in my appearance drew curious glances. I felt eyes on me, weighing, judging, questioning. I kept my composure, but at night, I wrestled with the idea that my personal journey could easily collide with societal expectations, with people's assumptions. The thrill of freedom was inseparable from the fear of exposure. One afternoon, my sister and I went out shopping. She handed me a pair of heels far taller than anything I had dared to wear before. I looked at her incredulously. "These are insane," I whispered. She laughed, a gentle, knowing laugh. "Exactly. They're supposed to scare you. That's the point. Growth comes from discomfort." I took a deep breath and slipped them on. My knees wobbled, but I held her hand, and together we walked through the store. People glanced, some stared, but instead of shrinking, I focused on the rhythm, the confidence coursing through each step. I felt myself shifting, not just physically, but emotionally. I realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. The real turning point came when I attended a small gathering of friends again, this time fully prepared. The dress, the heels, the makeup, all carefully chosen to reflect not just style, but identity. I noticed their reactions before I spoke. Some were surprised, some intrigued, a few hesitant. But as the evening went on, as I engaged in conversation, as I laughed and moved naturally, I realized something extraordinary. My presence, fully embraced, didn't elicit mockery. It commanded respect. It invited curiosity, even admiration. For the first time, I understood that transformation isn't just external. It's internal, and it radiates outward. The more authentic you are, the more compelling your presence becomes. I had feared exposure, feared judgment, but the truth was far more powerful. Embracing oneself can be liberating, even contagious. By the time the night ended, I was exhausted, yes, but exhilarated. I had faced the world as my true self, and it had responded not with cruelty, but with acknowledgement. My sister smiled at me, a proud, gentle smile. "You've come far," she said. "And this is only the beginning." As I walked home in the soft moonlight, heels clicking against the pavement, I felt an unshakable certainty for the first time in my life. The journey wasn't over. There would be challenges, doubts, setbacks. But now I knew, I had the courage to face them, the clarity to recognize my own worth, and the confidence to stand tall even when the world expected me to shrink. She saw me first. Yes. She nudged me. She guided me. But the transformation, the true, lasting transformation, was mine. Every step in those heels, every careful brushstroke, every moment of hesitation and triumph, had built a bridge between who I had been and who I had always wanted to be. And I knew, deep in my heart, that no matter what came next, I would never shrink again. The weeks that followed were a roller coaster of exhilaration and anxiety. Every day I experimented, every step in heels, every careful application of makeup, every sway of a dress, was both a victory and a test. I had learned to navigate the world with this new identity in private, but the real challenge, the one that made my heart pound with fear, was bringing it into spaces where it couldn't be hidden, where judgment lingered in the air like static electricity. It started with small encounters, walking past neighbors, sitting in cafes, running errands with subtle changes. At first, every glance felt like scrutiny, every whisper like a spotlight. I learned to hold my head high, to maintain poise even when my hands shook and my stomach twisted with nerves. My sister continued to guide me, quietly, never pushing, always reinforcing that courage was a muscle to be trained, that discomfort was part of growth. Then came the invitation I hadn't expected, a gathering of colleagues from work, a casual dinner at someone's apartment. I hesitated when I saw the invitation. Could I walk into that room fully myself? Could I maintain composure, hold my identity without fear, without retreating into old habits? My sister noticed my hesitation. "This is the moment you've been preparing for," she said. "Not to prove anything to them, but to yourself. If you can do this, nothing else will shake you." The night of the gathering, I spent hours preparing. The dress I chose was elegant, understated, yet commanding. The heels were higher than I usually dared, forcing each step to be deliberate, mindful. I applied makeup carefully, accentuating my features without hiding them. I rehearsed my walk, my posture, my gestures, until they felt like second nature. When I arrived, the room was full of familiar faces, some friendly, some curious, some indifferent. As I stepped in, the heels clicking against the floor, my heart raced. I could feel eyes following me, assessing, questioning. I wanted to shrink, to vanish, but I remembered my sister's words. I inhaled deeply, squared my shoulders, and moved forward with calm determination. The first few minutes were tense. Conversations paused briefly as people noticed, some smiling awkwardly, some staring in silence. I felt every heartbeat, every glance. But then, slowly, the room relaxed. People engaged with me, asked questions, laughed at my jokes, and the tension melted. It wasn't instant acceptance, but it was acknowledgement. They saw me, fully, and I saw myself reflected back in their reactions, not as a joke, not as a curiosity, but as a person. Then came a moment that almost made me falter. One of the more conservative colleagues, someone whose opinions I respected and feared in equal measure, leaned closer and whispered, "I didn't expect this from you." The words could have cut, could have shattered my fragile confidence, but instead, I realized something. I had expected judgment. I had feared it. And yet, I was still standing. Still moving forward. Still myself. I smiled softly and replied, "Neither did I. But here I am." That evening became a turning point. I returned home, exhausted but exhilarated. I stood in front of the mirror, removing heels and dress, but the feeling remained. Something inside had shifted irreversibly. I wasn't hiding anymore. I had faced the world as myself, And I had survived, thrived even. The transformation didn't stop there. I began to integrate this identity into my daily life, more boldly, subtle touches at work, more confident choices in social settings, and occasional private outings fully dressed and made up, just to feel the freedom of being seen without fear. Each step was a reaffirmation. This was me, this was my life, and I would no longer shrink to fit expectations. And yet, even as I grew more confident, the journey wasn't without its struggles. Moments of doubt returned unexpectedly, usually in the quiet of my room, when the world outside seemed indifferent or critical. I questioned whether I was too bold, whether I was asking too much of those around me, whether I had overstepped invisible boundaries. Each time, I opened my notebook, read my own words, remembered the steps I had taken, the courage I had built, and slowly reminded myself that fear is not the opposite of bravery, it is part of it. It was during one of these quiet nights that I realized the final piece of the transformation wasn't about clothing, makeup, or even confidence. It was about acceptance. Accepting that this side of me wasn't temporary or experimental. Accepting that my identity, my choices, my expression, were valid and worthy of respect even if the world wasn't ready to fully embrace them. And most importantly, accepting that I didn't need anyone else's approval to validate the person I had become. Looking back, I see that first moment in her heels as the spark, the moment that cracked open a door I didn't know existed. But the real journey was living beyond that spark, stepping through the door into a life where I could exist fully, boldly, and unapologetically. The heels, the dress, the makeup, they were tools, symbols, guides, but the transformation was inside me all along, waiting for permission to emerge. Months later, I stand in front of the mirror, heels on, dress fitted perfectly, makeup highlighting my features just enough to feel like myself. I catch my reflection and smile, not at a costume, but at a life fully claimed. The fear, the doubts, the hesitation, they exist still, because they always will. But they no longer control me. I am in control. I am seen. I am alive. And every step I take, every click of these heels, reminds me, I am enough. I am complete. I am me. Months had passed since that first day in her heels, and each day had been a careful balancing act between fear and freedom, hesitation and courage. But now, standing in front of the mirror, I realized something profound. I wasn't balancing anymore. I was steady. I was complete. The reflection staring back at me wasn't just a version of myself experimenting, hiding, or testing limits. It was me, fully realized, fully accepted, fully alive. It wasn't sudden. It had been gradual, like water slowly filling a vessel until it overflowed. Every hesitant step I had taken, every flicker of doubt, every tiny victory, had shaped me into this person. The heels that once made me wobble now felt like extensions of my confidence. The dresses, once symbols of fear and curiosity, were now celebrations of identity. Even the makeup, which I had approached nervously at first, was no longer a mask but a tool to express the parts of me I had finally embraced. That evening, my sister came in with a smile, holding a small box. "I think it's time," she said. I raised an eyebrow. Time for what? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured to my reflection in the mirror, to the person I had become. "Time for the world to see who you really are, if you're ready," she said gently. My stomach tightened. The thought of stepping outside fully, completely myself, without hiding even a fraction of who I was, made my heart race. But I didn't hesitate. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times. I had walked in heels alone, in private, for hours. I had faced friends, colleagues, even strangers, testing courage in smaller doses. And now, I was ready for the full exposure, the ultimate test of my transformation. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and stepped outside. The air was cool, evening light soft on my skin. Each step in the heels resonated with confidence, with certainty. People glanced as I walked past, some with surprise, some with curiosity, some with smiles. And for the first time, it didn't matter. I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize. I simply moved, existing fully as myself, and it felt incredible, liberating, irreversible. On the way home, I stopped at a small park, alone, and sat on a bench. I looked down at the heels, the dress, the careful styling, And for the first time, I didn't see symbols of fear or experimentation. I saw courage, authenticity, and the proof that I could navigate the world fully, boldly, unapologetically. A feeling of warmth spread through me, pride, relief, and joy mixed together in a way I had never imagined. When I returned home, my sister was waiting, watching me with that familiar knowing smile. "You've done it," she said softly. "Not because of what you wore or how you looked, but because of who you've become. You've claimed yourself." I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you," I whispered. She shook her head gently. "You could. I only reminded you of what was already inside. You gave yourself permission to be seen. That's the true transformation." In the following days, life didn't suddenly become easy. There were still curious glances, occasional questions, subtle judgments, but none of them could shake me now. Each challenge became a reminder of the strength I had built, of the courage I had nurtured, of the self I had claimed. I began to live more openly, experimenting with style, expression, and presence, not for validation, but for affirmation of my own existence. One quiet evening, I sat with my notebook open, flipping through the earliest entries. I read the words I had written the night I first tried on the heels, the confessions of fear and longing. I traced the journey, from curiosity to hesitation, from tentative steps to bold declarations. And I realized something beautiful. Transformation isn't a moment. It's a process. A series of choices, challenges, and victories that build upon each other until you no longer recognize the person you were not because they were lost, but because you've grown into someone greater. I looked at myself in the mirror again, heels on, dress fitted perfectly, hair and makeup as I preferred, not to impress anyone, but to honor myself. I tilted my head and smiled softly. The reflection staring back was no longer just a person experimenting or hiding or testing limits. It was me. Fully me. Complete. Brave. Seen. And in that moment, I understood the final truth of this journey. The transformation wasn't about clothes, heels, or makeup. It was about courage, honesty, and acceptance. It was about allowing myself to be fully known, even first to myself, and trusting that being seen, fully and unapologetically, was the greatest strength I could ever claim. I had started this journey in a pair of her heels, uncertain, trembling, afraid to even imagine the person I could become. But now, standing tall, heart steady, eyes clear, I realized something I would never forget. The world may notice, question, or react, but nothing could ever take away the person I had chosen to become. And as I whispered to my reflection, softly, resolutely, I said, "You are enough. You are whole. You are seen. And you will never shrink again."